Is POWH a scam and the new BitConnect? Recently we made a video basically highlighting all of the red flags with this project and concluded that we think it's probably a Ponzi or pyramid scheme, and therefore we are planning to stay well away from this project. Since then, POWH has actually made a video response to our initial video saying that many of our points are not valid. When I made our initial video, we had no plans to ever talk about this project again, and even when they made their video response, we still didn't want to respond to it because we didn't want to give them any more exposure than they've already had. The problem is, it's quite clear to see from their comment section and even our comment section that people have been drawn in by this project, which is the only reason I'm making this video now. I really don't want to be talking about them still, but if this video can just save a couple of people from making a big mistake, then it's all worth it. I know full well that this is going to get a ton of dislikes, but at the end of the day, as I say, if it stops a couple of people, then it really has been worth it. Nothing in this video or on this channel is financial advice. We don't claim to be market experts. We're simply enthusiasts. We do research and then we share our personal opinions with you guys. The way that this video is going to be structured is that I'm going to be showing you some of their video response and then responding to that myself. If you are invested into this project, feel free to dislike this video if you really want. All I'd ask is that you actually watch this video from start to finish, because out of everyone, it's the people invested that really need to see these points. If you don't agree with me, that is absolutely fine. All I ask is that you keep an open mind and consider these points from an outside perspective. Forget about the fact that you're invested and simply look at this from a neutral perspective. During this video, I want you guys to keep in mind that the guy who responded to our video is clearly very smart and articulate. He sounds very convincing with his words, but just because you're convincing, it does not mean that you're correct. So what I would ask is people to simply look at the facts. As you guys know, I kind of hate being on camera. I'm really quite bad at YouTube. I just heavily edit the videos so they end up looking okay. I'm much more of a writer than anything else. So if you watch his video and you watch our video, he might come across as more convincing, but don't let that fool you. There are many people who have run Ponzi schemes in the past that are very smart and convincing people. Just look at Bernie Madoff as an example. Do you really think that he wouldn't have been smart and articulate if he recorded a video? Of course he would have, but it doesn't change the fact that he was running a Ponzi scheme. So please bear that in mind. Don't be drawn in by anything he says. Keep a clear head and just look at the pure facts. Another important point to make is that this project are claiming that they are a game and therefore they can't be a Ponzi scheme. Just because you call yourself a game, it doesn't really mean a single thing. Simply applying a different label to your project doesn't change anything whatsoever. If a Ponzi scheme labels themselves as a game, they're still a Ponzi scheme. Another important thing I want you guys to question is where the fundamental value of the project actually comes from. You're going to hear a lot of bullshit talking about the fundamental value of the token, but the tokens have to derive their value from somewhere. If the project isn't creating new wealth, isn't creating value in some sort of way by providing a service or something like that, then the tokens themselves cannot have fundamental value either. How could a project have no fundamental value, but their tokens have fundamental value? The concept makes no sense whatsoever. When you have a Ponzi scheme, what it does is it creates temporary value. Not fundamental value, it doesn't create new wealth, it simply creates temporary value by shifting the wealth from one person to another. So in that sense, it's creating temporary value for certain people within the scheme. If there isn't a fundamental value, well, then it doesn't really sound like a legitimate business to us. So I want everyone to think about that point and try to decide where they think the fundamental value of the project actually comes from. If you can't think any value that it's producing, that's not a good sign. And the final point I want to make before we begin the video response is that if they create a response to this video, or in fact, if they create any more videos whatsoever, I'd like them to put their face on camera when they record it. Not just a little picture that they've stolen off the internet, an actual recording of their face in the corner while they record their video. If they are a legitimate project, they shouldn't have any hesitation whatsoever in doing this. If they don't do this, it's kind of an obvious indication of the type of project they really are. As I say, the guy making the video response, he's a smart and articulate guy. I'm sure he'll come up with some sort of bullshit reason why he can't put his face on camera. If that's not a big red flag for everyone, I really don't know what is. Now we're going to jump into the video response, and in between clips of me responding, you're basically going to be watching their video where they were actually responding to me. Hence, I'm going to be like a smaller section in the middle of the screen. That's because it's their video response. So without any further ado, let's jump into point number one. I can't really ignore it anymore. Therefore, I wanted to bring you guys this impartial review of the project and give my personal opinions. The reason I'm making this video is because I want to educate some of you, and hopefully it will save a few of you some money and stop you from getting scammed.
You start off by saying you dislike these kinds of projects, whatever that may imply. Then you go on about how you're doing an impartial review, after which you again take a clear stance and pick a side. Do we really think this is impartial?
When I say I created an impartial review, what I mean is when I first approached the project, I had no bias whatsoever. I had no reason to give them a positive review or a negative review. I simply looked at them from an impartial perspective and then I formed an opinion. Just because my opinion was a negative one doesn't mean it wasn't impartial. I had no reason to pick either side. If you're a new investor to the platform, you're going to pay a 10% fee, and that money that you've just given to the platform is going to be distributed to the existing token holders, i.e. the old investors. You're a new investor coming along and you're paying the old investors.
This is only half correct, as you, even if you buy P3D for the first time, will be accounted as a token holder with the first P3D token that you buy. Let me explain that a little more in detail. The way the contract works is that if you want to buy, say, 10 tokens, you will receive your first part of the 10% fee after you receive the first token. The process of calculating the fee is basically engaged for every single token you want to buy or sell. So in this way, you're sort of also paying yourself.
So basically what they're saying is when you first join the platform and pay your ridiculous 10% fee, you are actually receiving some of that fee yourself as you are becoming a token holder. This is kind of a moot point because you might receive 0.001% of this fee. If the other 99.999% is going to the other token holders, then that's still a case of the new investor paying the old investor. You're just paying them an ever so slightly less amount.
And to go even further, it's not just new participants whom you'll benefit from, but also already existing participants that might buy new tokens or sell their stack.
This is actually quite an interesting point, and I have to admit that when I said in the last video it's only the new investors paying the old investors, that isn't 100% entirely true. It's also true that old investors, if they want to leave the scheme, they'll also have to pay a 10% fee. To be honest though, this doesn't really change anything. Just because they're paying a 10% exit fee, it doesn't change the fact that this project would still have to rely on new people coming into the project regularly in order to assist the token prices. Let's say you have a new investor come along to the platform, they pay a 10% fee to join the platform, they stay for a couple of months maybe, then they pay a 10% exit fee. Once they've gone, that's still one less person on the platform paying fees to the token holders. If that continues decreasing over time, you're still going to have less people on the platform paying fees, which means the tokens are going to be worth less. Therefore, they still have to get in a new person to replace that old investor. Just because they're paying an exit fee as well, it doesn't really change anything. In the case of proof of weak hands, there is apparently only one token that you can buy on the exchange.
Our project is now a little over a month old and the success has completely overwhelmed our development cycle. We do plan for more trading pairs because we essentially want to build a fully decentralized exchange at some point. But as I already stated, our project has just started, and with many things already planned but not yet revealed to the public, it's a little harsh to say that proof of weak hands will not provide any fundamental value in the future.
The reason I say that they are not an exchange, and despite their claims that they want to build a future decentralized exchange, that is, in my eyes, complete bollocks, because I've never seen an exchange launch with only one token available, which is their token. That quite literally is not an exchange. First red flag is the 10% fee. As I say, for a business to really be legitimate, it has to have a fundamental value. The fundamental value on other exchanges comes from the volume that they're able to create. With a 10% transaction fee, that is ridiculously high, and no one would ever use that exchange.
10% is not a high fee if you take into account that there's no minimum withdrawal limit, unlike with exchanges such as Binance, who charge a per currency based fee and have a per currency based minimum withdrawal rate. Specifically looking at Ethereum, where you have to withdraw at least 0.02 Ether. We also let you have full access even to your dust, which Binance also keeps for itself and does not make available to you for anything other than, well, collecting more dust. And even better, the fee benefits the users and not the exchange, unlike Binance, who's covering their operational costs of course, but is also enriching themselves.
This point links quite nicely in with the previous point when I say that their business model makes no sense whatsoever. How could you have an exchange which is charging a 10% fee, even if they did add other trading pairs, which I'm pretty confident they have no plans to do? Still, no one would ever want to trade those pairs because that is a ridiculous 10% fee. This is a great example of how they're trying to skirt around the facts in their video response by not highlighting any real numbers or using any facts, figures, anything like that, kind of just brushing all over it to try and hide what they don't want you to see. What I mean by this is at no point did they bother saying the Binance fee, because you would see how ridiculous their fee actually is. Binance charge a 0.1% fee, which you can even reduce down to 0.05%. A 10% fee compared to 0.1%. That is 100 times the value. Do you really think an exchange is ever going to work if they're charging 100 times their competitors? It's clearly not a business model that works. To put it into context, if you were to trade £100 on POWH, well, you'd be charged a £10 fee. A similar trade on Binance is going to cost you between 5 and 10 pence. 5 to 10 pence or £10. With that in mind, it's quite clear to see that even if they were to add future trading pairs and become a decentralized exchange, nobody would ever use their platform because nobody's going to pay those kind of fees. That is why I'm so confident they'll never add future trading pairs, because nobody would ever trade them. Instead of being specific with numbers, what they talk about is the fact that Binance require a minimum withdrawal fee of 0.02 Ether, whereas they don't. In other words, at the current price, with Binance, you'd have to withdraw at least $8 worth of Ether if you wanted to take your Ether out. This point is so irrelevant when you compare the fees between the two platforms that it's almost a joke. They only have their own token for sale, just like BitConnect used to have. There are many overlaps with this project.
We get this comparison very often.
That should be a big red flag. If a project is regularly being compared to the biggest scam in cryptocurrencies, that's a red flag right there.
However, we can't really see why. BitConnect was a centralized wallet that kept your Bitcoin locked when you staked them, and the only way to retrieve them was through BitConnect's own website. With proof of weak hands, you can access your funds at any time. The recent DDoS proved that to be true. Users deployed their own exchanges as backups and interacted with our smart contract in a normal way. No one can stop you from retrieving your funds, ever.
They're kind of ignoring the real reason they're so regularly compared to BitConnect. It's not because you can't take your funds out, it's because they have a very similar business model, which happens to be in a very pyramid-like structure. Now, there are a few clips in their video which I'm not going to include in this video. You're more than welcome to hit the button in the top right and it will take you to our previous video. You can see those points. I'm not trying to hide anything, but this video is going to get stupidly long if I show a video response to everything. I'm still going to address every single point though, because I don't want them to come back saying that I was ignoring some of their points because it looked bad or something like that they're gonna claim. The next red flag that I highlighted related to masternodes. They basically came back and said that they don't really have masternodes. It was just a bit of satire. Fair enough if they want to say that. There's not really anything else to say on the matter. The next red flag I highlighted was that I said Craig Grant and Trevon James have been promoting this project, which is always a bad sign, bearing in mind that they were the BitConnect guys. They said that they don't have any control over who promotes their project. Not really much to say to that point either. The next red flags that I highlighted relate to the shill kit, which is on their website, and the fact that they just simply have pyramids drawn all over their website. They basically say that this is satire, they're trying to take the piss, they're the exact opposite of a pyramid scheme apparently. So by drawing pyramids all over their website and describing it as a shell kit with memes including pyramids, they're just trying to use a bit of satire to make a joke. Personally, what we think they're doing is providing themselves with a safety net in case they ever get caught. If in the future this collapses and they get caught and arrested, they can say, well look, our website had tons of pyramids all over it. We were quite clear about the fact it was a pyramid scheme. That looks better than trying to deceive people by saying it's not a pyramid scheme, which is exactly what BitConnect did. That's why we personally think that they're putting this on their website, because they're planning for the future and giving themselves a nice little safety net in case it ever goes wrong. Now I want to address a couple of interesting points that they mention on the website. Point number one is that they say they cannot steal your Ethereum because unlike BitConnect, this is all based around a smart contract which is publicly auditable, and therefore they wouldn't be able to change the smart contract and take your funds. Point number two is that they say the website is simply a front end for the exchange, and therefore even if the website is taken down, the exchange itself can still run. In a sense, this is actually quite interesting. BitConnect was basically just a centralized exchange and they just ran away with everyone's funds. In the case of POWH, because it's based on a smart contract, in theory, this isn't possible. The problem I have with this is that the only people who have confirmed this to be true are the project themselves. You guys know that I have a background in business. I'm not a programmer, I'm not a coder. I can't go through the code and audit it myself.
You say you're not a coder, so I'll link you a video of someone who did a very thorough job at analyzing our code and going through it line by line. In the future, we will look for quote-unquote trustworthy individuals or companies to get this stuff certified, so even the most skeptic person can accept the results.
They mention here linking me to a thorough code review carried out by someone on YouTube. I don't know the guy who went through the code, so I would not want to call him out in any way whatsoever. But it doesn't really look great on POWH when the person they have to rely on for a thorough code review has 500 subscribers and has 4 videos, all of which are about proof of weak hands. Here is my request to POWH. You've clearly grown to the size where you can afford to hire a proper company to review your code. So go to QuantStamp, a project which reviews these kind of codes, and have them audit your code. If it's legitimate, they will publish that information and everyone is going to believe it if a legitimate project like QuantStamp actually says it's true. In fact, why don't you publicly tweet them and ask them to do this? Let's make it all nice and transparent. No closed doors. After all, if you're a legitimate project, you don't need to do things behind closed doors. You can publicly tweet QuantStamp and we can all see what they say. If they think you're a legitimate project, they're going to be quite happy to review your code. It's really that simple. Once again, if they don't want to do this and have their code properly audited, that's another huge red flag. The reason that this project is called POWH 3D is because this is the 3rd version of the project, and the first 2 versions both had backdoors which could be exploited. Basically, the code wasn't written correctly and people were able to go and steal the funds from the smart contract. Now they say that those backdoors were accidental in the first 2 versions. That could be true, or it could be the case that they were trying to put in a backdoor so that they could do exactly that, so that they could run away with people's money.
As already explained in our other videos, the first iterations were straight copies from Jochen Hoenike's Ponzi token contract.
Did I just hear that correctly? Their first 2 versions were from a project called Ponzi token. Ponzi token.
The first iterations were straight copies from Jochen Hoenike's Ponzi token contract that was purely experimental and did not undergo any sort of testing before it was released on the Ropsten testnet, where it was eventually also terminated. The programmers that made the first 2 iterations had no idea what they were doing and didn't understand the underlying concepts of the EVM or Solidity in general, which led to the hack. Your claim that the so-called backdoor could have been placed in there by the developers can be easily disproven if you take the contract source from Hoenike and do a diff check with the original proof of weak hands contract. You will see that the functions leading to this exploit were already present in the original Ponzi token code by Honecker. Anyway, the current contract is developed by an entirely new team that just took over the project's name and continued the legacy.
So their way of saying that they definitely don't have any backdoors this time is to just tell everyone, oh, don't worry, we have a new team this time, so we promise it's legitimate. I'll tell you what, if you really want to prove it, why don't you tell us who the new team is? Let's see all of their profiles. Let's watch them in a video. Let's get a nice group profile picture together. In fact, not a group profile picture, because I know full well you can find those online. Let's get a video of all of them together talking about the project. If you're a legitimate project, why wouldn't you do that? Instead, they want us to just rely on them when they say, don't worry, we have a new team. It's all good this time. I honestly don't know, and I'm not going to accuse them of intentionally doing that the last 2 times. I'm not saying they've done it again with this version. All I'm saying is personally, I would never trust people who are essentially setting up a pyramid scheme to have not put in a backdoor to the code and be able to take people's funds.
You're not going to accuse us of putting in a backdoor, but still leaving your viewers a very clear message that you don't trust a pyramid scheme to not have any backdoors in it.
Well, my answer to this one is pretty simple. Yes, I absolutely do not trust any business that has a Ponzi scheme as their whole business model. Neither should anybody else. The second point was that the website is simply a front end, and even if the website is taken down, then the exchange in theory will continue running. That is what they are claiming, because obviously everyone saw BitConnect basically just disappear overnight. And when you have a similar scheme come along, everyone's going to have the same fears. So if you can alleviate those fears by basically saying that the website is just a front end and the exchange cannot be deleted, it can't be changed in any way or anything like that, it's going to alleviate some people's fears. I would not trust people who are setting up a pyramid scheme with carrying this out.
The recent DDoS attack perfectly demonstrated how the statement is holding true. We deployed one official backup through a GitHub page, and many users also created their own exchange to interact with the contract. Even though the website was pulled offline, the contract was still receiving a massive amount of orders.
It is just a front end, and you can interact with the smart contract without their front end. But that's kind of irrelevant. If they're a Ponzi scheme, who cares whether you can use a backup version of their Ponzi scheme or not? It's still gonna be a Ponzi scheme. The problem is, when everyone knows it's a pyramid scheme, if there is a significant dip in prices that comes along at some point, this could be a terrifying moment for investors because they believe this could be the end of the scheme, and therefore they should get out as well.
We've just experienced a massive sell-off that dropped the balance from almost 20,000 to somewhere around 12,000 Ether before it recovered. The result of that was an increase in users on our Discord and more subscribers to our social media channels, as well as an increase of new purchase orders. Everybody participating knows that cryptocurrencies are a highly volatile thing, and such price dips are to be expected. This is no different than when a whale decides to sell his Tronics bags and dump the prices to insane lows. While our price movement is more predictable due to the nature the price of each token is being calculated, we are not exempt from getting a few whales or pools to dump their tokens. And this is just fine, because it is part of the everlasting circle that makes proof of weak hands such an interesting game for its participants.
This one is kind of another irrelevant point. I appreciate they were responding to what I said, so I'm not blaming them for bringing up this point, but when I mentioned it in my video, I was just trying to really explain to people why I thought this was a bad investment. It kind of detracts from the overall point when it's included here though, because what we're really trying to figure out is whether they're a Ponzi scheme or not. Whether they're going to crash faster than BitConnect or not, or whether they've rebounded similar to how BitConnect did at certain times, doesn't really mean anything. Once again, if they're a Ponzi scheme, all of these details are very irrelevant. You see, when you invest into a business, they're creating real value in the world. When you invest into a Ponzi scheme, you're basically taking the money from every new investor that comes after you. No new wealth is being created. You're just taking someone else's money that joins later than you.
So here's some food for thought. A cryptocurrency that has no released product, like EOS for example, gains its value purely by speculation and hype, since there's no fundamental value behind it at the moment, other than a roadmap and a pretty white paper. If you buy EOS, you hope for more people to buy as well, so the price increases and you can maybe sell at a nice profit. Does that make EOS a pyramid? And if not, what's the difference between EOS and Proof of Weak Hands?
Of all of the responses in the video, this one is actually the one that concerned me the most. There is a huge difference between POWH and EOS. It's almost not even worth discussing. But I do want to make sure that none of our subscribers lose any money. So I'm going to explain the difference, and it is very, very significant. The easiest way to do so is to use an analogy. Let's say that I had a fantastic business idea, so I decided I wanted to set up a business. The problem is I currently have no money to build my business, so I go to someone who's rich, or maybe a company, and they are willing to give me money in return for shares. Currently, those shares have no value whatsoever. They are pure speculation, very similar to EOS. But that doesn't mean that they are a Ponzi scheme, because the difference is in the future, they should have fundamental value. Those shares that I'm selling to someone else have no current value, but when I build that business and I start turning a profit, those shares are going to be worth a considerable amount of money. And this is the exact same thing with EOS tokens. EOS are trying to build one of the best smart contract platforms out there, so in the future they will have thousands of different use cases. And EOS tokens are at the very core of that platform. Therefore, if they are successful, in the future, their tokens will be worth a significant amount of money. So the reason that people are buying them now is because they understand that in the future there's going to be a fundamental value, because the actual business has real use cases. And that's where POWH is completely different, because the business isn't creating any fundamental value. So how would any fundamental value be transferred to their tokens? EOS will have fundamental value in the future. Just because they haven't built their platform yet does not mean that they are a Ponzi scheme. Whereas POWH literally have the business model of a Ponzi scheme. Those two really are entirely different, and I hope everyone can see the difference between those two.
Would we get rid of the pyramid stigma simply by releasing a roadmap and a white paper?
The answer to this is that POWH would get rid of the pyramid stigma by doing a few things. Number one, putting their face on camera. If anyone's trying to pull off a con, the last thing they want to do is be seen by everyone. So put your face on camera, and that's going to give everyone a lot more confidence. Number two is to come up with a business model that will actually work in the real world. As I say, charging a 100 times higher fee than Binance means no one's ever going to want to trade any trading pairs on their platform. Combine this with the fact that they only have one trading pair, which is their own token, and there is no fundamental value whatsoever. A white paper and a roadmap aren't really going to do anything unless they actually have a legitimate business model and they are willing to put their face on it. I've said this a couple times now in this video. I want to make this point very clear. If you are a legitimate project, because I'm sure you're watching this video, record a video response and have your face on camera while you do so. If you do that, I'm going to have a lot more respect. If you come up with some ridiculous reason why you don't want to or can't do that, well, I think we all know the outcome there. The other reason is that if this project becomes big enough that it's very well known in the market, and then it eventually crashes, that's going to be another bad association with cryptocurrencies.
I still don't understand how you think this project will crash and burn. The price development is defined in the contract, and people could theoretically calculate at any point in time what would happen if everybody but they themselves were to sell their token and withdraw all the ether in the contract. How much would be left? What would they be receiving in such a case? This all is mathematically provable and therefore involves even less risk than any other cryptocurrency that is being pumped and dumped right now.
There's a couple of obvious ways in which this project might crash. Number one, as I've always said, they might have a backdoor in their code which they can just take everyone's funds from. Bearing in mind that their only code review was done by a guy on YouTube with 500 subscribers and only 4 videos all about POWH, that doesn't really inspire me with a lot of confidence. Get that review done by QuantStamp and maybe I'll take that one off the list. Reason number 2 relates to the SEC. I know that they're a smart contract and they're on the blockchain, the code is immutable, you can't get rid of it, you can't shut down their platform. But if they are caught in the midst of a Ponzi scheme and the SEC finds out who they are and arrests them, that's gonna be pretty damn bad for token prices, and I'm sure we're going to see the project collapse as a result. So anyone that's investing into this project is kind of creating a PR nightmare for the cryptocurrency market and adding to the general public thinking that this space is full of scam.
If anything, proof of weak hands would be the cherry on the cake if we were a scam. Projects like Proteum that run an ICO and run off, BitConnect that take off with their users' funds, Devorcoin that shut down their platforms, and many others have already set this notion in the mainstream's mind.
The POWH is far worse than Devorcoin or any other scam ICO because it's already so much larger than the majority of those projects, and the way it's going is probably going to get even bigger. It's much more comparable to something like BitConnect because they have come up with quite an innovative way of devising a pyramid scheme, so it could well grow to the size of BitConnect or even more.
You being so scared of what the public might think of cryptocurrencies is also a nice indicator that deep down you actually are aware that your crypto investments can only thrive if new money comes into them.
The reason I don't like projects like this having a negative impact on the public perception is because I see shit like this all of the time in the mainstream media, and I don't want more people to add to it. The problem is that when I talk to people and I mention Bitcoin, the first thing that comes into their mind is drug money. Not financial freedom, it's drug money. There is this public perception that is quite negative about cryptocurrencies, and as someone that works in cryptocurrencies full time, it's quite annoying when you talk to people and they don't really understand about cryptocurrencies because they've heard some of this bullshit in the mainstream media. And on top of that, this sort of stuff can slow the industry down because the more scams that there are around, the more likely that someone like the SEC and other regulatory bodies are going to clamp down on cryptocurrency projects very soon. So I don't really want to see a project like this grow to any sort of size because I think they add to the bad name of cryptocurrencies, which isn't really deserved in the first place. I think that pyramid schemes are simply awful, and that is why I have actually reported this to the SEC.
This is a very noble thing of you to try and protect the innocent, but this wouldn't be the first report the SEC is getting about us, and it surely won't be the last.
Wait. Did he just say that this isn't the first report the SEC have got about them and it won't be the last? Isn't that a red flag for everyone? He's openly admitting that people regularly report them to the SEC. Why would people do that unless there is something fishy about this project?
We don't promise our participants anything and are not deceiving them into buying our tokens. And since our entire project is running on an immutable and irrevocable smart contract, the SEC might be able to shut down one website, but will not be able to shut down the idea and community behind it. It will live on for as long as the Ethereum blockchain exists, as there is no central point of access to any of this. This shouldn't come as a surprise if you had done a little more research before putting out a clickbait video.
Obviously, if you're a subscriber, you know that I've talked about the blockchain being immutable, so I know full well that you can't just take down this project. But as I alluded to earlier, if the SEC get involved, they find the people who have set this up and they arrest them, that might as well be the same as taking down the code, because I can't imagine there are really going to be many people wanting to use this project when the founders are behind bars. That is the reason I reported them to the SEC, and if you also believe what they're doing is immoral, feel free to click the link in the description and you can report them as well.
You were also so kind to reply to our comment in your video and requested that we have a little talk about the intrinsic value of proof of weak hands in its current state. And because we want this to be a purely objective discussion, we gladly take your question and answer it. To determine the intrinsic value of a cryptocurrency is currently a difficult, near impossible task that even currencies that have been around for a long time might not be able to achieve.
This is another example where the guy making the video response is very articulate and he kind of crosses things over to make it sound very confusing for people and convince them of what he thinks. He says that it's very difficult to determine the intrinsic value of a cryptocurrency. It is very difficult to determine the true value of a cryptocurrency because at this point in time we don't really have a framework for valuing cryptocurrencies. However, it is not difficult to determine the intrinsic value for many of them. Let's take a platform known as Salt as an example. Salt is a platform where you can receive a loan by locking up your cryptocurrency as collateral. Someone will loan you some money, and if you make your repayments at the end of the loan, you're gonna get your Bitcoin back. In order to use the Salt platform, you first have to buy tokens, as they are membership tokens and allow you to access it. Without those tokens, you can't use their platform. If you ask me to actually put a value on what the token should be, that is virtually impossible, but I can tell you there is significant intrinsic value to that token because I need it in order to use their platform. Therefore, if I want to use their platform, I have to go and buy tokens. And that is where the demand comes from. They're offering a real service which people are going to want, hence their business has fundamental value, and then they pass some of this value onto the tokens by making them membership tokens. This is a great example where you have to create fundamental value for the business in order to be able to pass that on to the token. If you don't create value in the first place with your business, you can't have fundamental value for your token.
What is the intrinsic value of Litecoin? It is a faster alternative to Bitcoin, but is that enough to make it valuable? And if so, why do we need so many forks of Litecoin that basically all do the same thing?
Litecoin has value because it allows you to hold and transfer wealth in a decentralized manner. That right there is intrinsic value. I do agree that it is utterly ridiculous in the current market space. There are so many forks and so many ridiculous projects, but it doesn't mean that you can basically just say, because there are other ridiculous projects, that makes our project okay. That whole argument fundamentally makes no sense whatsoever.
Where's the intrinsic value in EOS in its current state? The only reason the ICO is still running is because people blindly throw money at an idea. If EOS were to run off tomorrow with everyone's funds in their pockets, what value would the ERC20 EOS token have?
This one I've already addressed. People are buying EOS tokens right now because they think they will have fundamental value in the future, much more than they currently do, and they want to get them for a cheaper price right now.
P3D tokens currently serve as a sort of bank account that will give its users an undefined rate of interest at an undefined interval if there is volume generated inside the smart contract. In that sense, holding P3D tokens currently makes more sense than owning EOS tokens, as they do nothing other than being an object of pure speculation.
Basically, P3D tokens have fundamental value because they earn you an interest rate. Now, does that sound scarily familiar to BitConnect? Once again, they're making this comparison to EOS tokens, but it's just ridiculous because the EOS project will produce fundamental value and they've linked that to the tokens. The POWH project will add no value to the world, and therefore where does the value from the tokens really come from? You can't just create value out of thin air without the project creating value itself. The only way that you can fake for this to happen is via a Ponzi scheme. And that is simply just taking one person's money and giving it to someone else. That's why some people make money in a Ponzi scheme and others lose money. So the key takeaway points here are that POWH as a project is not producing any fundamental value, and therefore it can't pass any value onto the tokens. All it's doing is creating temporary value in the same way that a Ponzi scheme does. That will eventually run out and a lot of people will lose money. My comments to the people who are going to probably make a video response of my response, as I've said many times throughout this video, please put your face on the camera. I'm right here. I'm in the middle of the screen right now talking to everyone who is subscribed. You guys are yet to show your face. You guys are yet to show your faces. The biggest step you can do if you really want to convince people is just to put your face on the camera. It is really, really that simple. And then on top of that, go get QuantStamp to audit your code. They might actually find that it's legitimate, and the scheme that you guys are running doesn't mean that you have to steal people's funds. If you were to do that, you'd obviously make more money from the scheme, but I'm sure you're making enough money anyway. But why don't you reassure the public? If you have so many people investing into your project as you do now, and you've actually bragged about in your video, you guys are clearly doing well enough that you can afford for QuantStamp to review your code. So why don't you go ask them? Why don't you publicly show us? Anyway guys, that is the end of the video. I sincerely hope that you haven't been drawn in by this guy being, as I say, smart and articulate and sounding like it makes a lot of sense. I hope that you just see through all of the bullshit and just look at the pure core facts. Honestly, just get a piece of paper and draw out the business model for yourself. If you're new to this channel and you're sick of the standard crypto bullshit out there, and you want someone who's just gonna tell it to you how it is, make sure to hit that subscription button. From Tom here at Crypto Gurus, thank you so much for watching, and we will speak again very soon.